At the family dinner, Dad declared, "You are a parasite. We want to live without you. Get out." Mom sipped her wine, smiling. I left. Days later, they lost it all. I replied, "I know. My name is Claire Hayes. I am 38 years old, and if you had asked me a year ago what my purpose in life was, I would have told you it was to keep my family from drowning. I live in Lincoln, Nebraska, a place where the winters do not just get cold, they get aggressive. The wind howls across the plains and cuts right through your clothes, sinking deep into your bones. But the weather outside was nothing compared to the chill inside my childhood home. It was the morning of Christmas Eve. The sky was a bruised, heavy gray, threatening another massive snowstorm, but I was already awake before the sun even bothered to try and rise. I had to be. My morning started with a miserable drive across town on icy roads to pick up my father's heart medication. My father, Edward, is 65 years old, and his prescriptions are not covered by his basic insurance. The pharmacist handed me a small paper bag, and the total flashed on the screen. It was almost $300. I did not blink. I just pulled out my worn credit card, swiped it, and swallowed the familiar knot of anxiety in my throat. I had not bought myself a new winter coat in 5 years. The one I wore had a broken zipper and frayed cuffs, but a new coat was a luxury I could not afford. I was too busy sending $2,000 every single month to keep my parents' mortgage paid, their lights on, and their heat running. When I finally pulled into the driveway of my parents' house, my hands were numb from gripping the steering wheel. I unlocked the front door, carrying the heavy bags of groceries I had also paid for. The house smelled intensely of cheap pine air freshener, masking the scent of stale beer. The television was blaring from the living room. I walked into the kitchen, my boots leaving small puddles of melted snow on the linoleum. There was my sister, Chelsea. She is 32 years old, yet she acts like a teenager who is constantly inconvenienced by the world. She was sitting at the kitchen island, meticulously painting her nails a bright, obnoxious shade of red, completely ignoring the bags of groceries cutting into my hands. She did not even look up. "You forgot to buy the organic cranberry sauce," she muttered, inspecting her thumb. "I cannot eat the canned stuff, Claire. It is full of toxins." I took a deep breath, setting the heavy bags onto the counter with a loud thud. "I bought what was on sale, Chelsea," I said, my voice tight. In the corner of the adjoining dining room, my mother, Diane, was already working on her first glass of wine. She is 62, with perfectly styled hair and a wardrobe that suggests a woman of leisure, entirely funded by my exhausting freelance graphic design work. She swirled the dark red liquid in her expensive crystal glass, a glass I had bought her for Mother's Day 3 years ago. "Oh, Claire, do not be so snappy on Christmas Eve," Diane said, her voice dripping with that fake, syrupy sweetness she used whenever she wanted to avoid a real conversation. "Your sister is very sensitive to preservatives. You know that. Now, hurry up with the turkey. The guests will be here at 6 o'clock sharp." I looked at the massive, frozen bird resting in the sink. My hands were already aching from the cold and the heavy lifting, but there was no time to rest. I took off my frayed coat, threw it over a chair, tied a stained apron around my waist, and got to work. No one offered to help. No one ever did. As I stood at the kitchen counter, chopping carrots, celery, and onions, the repetitive motion usually brought me some kind of peace. But that morning, the sharp pain shooting through the joints of my fingers only brought back a flood of bitter memories. My hands used to create art. 5 years ago, I was not just the tired, resentful daughter chopping vegetables in a hot, crowded kitchen. 5 years ago, I was the proud owner of a thriving graphic design agency. I had a beautiful office downtown with exposed brick walls, a team of 3 talented junior designers, and a portfolio of high-paying corporate clients. I was building a life. I was building a future. Then, Edward had his massive heart attack. It happened right before Thanksgiving. The doctors said he needed an emergency triple bypass surgery to survive. He had been laid off from his management job 2 years prior and had carelessly let his premium health insurance lapse because he thought it was a waste of money. The hospital bills piled up instantly, reaching tens of thousands of dollars before he was even out of the intensive care unit. I remember the exact moment my life derailed. I was sitting in the sterile, fluorescent-lit hospital waiting room. Diane pulled me aside, her face pale, her eyes wide with manufactured panic. She gripped my arms tightly, her nails digging into my skin. "We are going to lose the house, Claire," she sobbed, wiping away tears that never quite fell. "Chelsea cannot help. She is just finding herself right now. You are the only one who has any real money. You have that fancy business. If you do not help us, your father will die, and we will be out on the street. Do you want that on your conscience?" I was completely manipulated. The guilt was suffocating. I had been conditioned my entire life to believe that I was responsible for my family's emotional and financial well-being. So, I did the unthinkable. I contacted a larger, rival design firm and sold my business. I sold my client list, my brand, my equipment, and my dream. I remember the smell of the fresh ink on the contract the day I signed it all away. It smelled like defeat. I took the lump sum from the sale and paid off Edward's medical debts. I paid off the massive credit card debt Diane had secretly accumulated. I thought that would be the end of it, a one-time sacrifice to save my family. I was entirely wrong. It was only the beginning. Once they realized I could be their safety net, they stopped trying. Edward never went back to work, claiming his heart was too weak, despite the doctor clearing him for light duty. Chelsea quit her part-time job as a receptionist because it was too stressful for her mental health. And Diane just continued to live her life as if nothing had changed, hosting luncheons and buying imported wines. To keep us all afloat, I had to take on 3 separate freelance design contracts, working remotely from the cramped desk in my childhood bedroom. I worked 14-hour days, staring at a computer screen until my eyes burned and my vision blurred. I surrendered my youth, my savings, and my freedom, entirely convinced it was my duty as a daughter. I chopped another onion, the sharp fumes burning my eyes, though I refused to let a single tear fall. By 6 o'clock that evening, the house was packed. The dining room table groaned under the weight of the massive turkey, the mashed potatoes, the gravy, and the side dishes I had spent the entire day preparing. Extended family members filled the chairs, aunts, uncles, and cousins who only ever showed up for free food and gossip. The noise was deafening. Silverware clinking, loud laughter, and the chaotic hum of overlapping conversations filled the stuffy room. I sat at the very end of the table, near the kitchen door, completely exhausted. My back throbbed, and my feet were swollen from standing for 8 hours straight. I pushed the food around on my plate, too tired to even chew. As the dinner progressed, the conversation shifted toward the upcoming winter season and the rising costs of everything. I saw an opening. I cleared my throat, hoping for a shred of understanding from the people I was keeping alive. "Actually," I said, my voice quiet but steady, cutting through the chatter just enough to be heard by my parents. "Speaking of costs, I am going to need some help with the heating bill next month, Dad. My freelance contracts have been really slow the past few weeks, and the gas company is raising their rates. If Chelsea could maybe chip in a few $100s. I did not even get to finish my sentence. Edward's face turned a violent shade of purple. He dropped his fork onto his porcelain plate with a sharp, aggressive clatter. He suddenly slammed his heavy fist down on the wooden dining table. The loud bang echoed through the room like a gunshot. Instantly, the entire table went dead silent. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Conversations stopped mid-word. Edward leaned forward, his eyes narrowed into slits of pure, unadulterated disgust. He looked at me not like a daughter, but like a disease. "How dare you," he hissed, his voice trembling with rage. "How dare you sit at my table, eating the food in my house, and demand money from your sister? You do nothing but sit on your computer all day in your room." "Dad, I work to pay the mortgage," I whispered, genuinely shocked by the sudden venom. "You do nothing," he roared, standing up from his chair. He pointed a thick, trembling finger directly at my face. "You are a parasite. Do you hear me? You're a parasite sucking the life out of this family. We are sick of your constant complaining. We want to live without you. Get out. Get out right now." The words hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. A parasite. Me, the woman who had literally sold her future to pay for the very heart beating inside his chest. I looked around the table, desperately seeking a single face of defense. The extended family members simply stared down at their laps, entirely unwilling to intervene. I looked at Chelsea. She was staring at her freshly painted red nails, a small, undeniable smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. Finally, I looked at my mother. Diane was sitting gracefully in her chair, holding her crystal glass. She took a slow, deliberate sip of her expensive red wine, looked directly into my eyes, and smiled. She actually smiled. My chest burned with a fire so hot I thought it would consume me, but a strange, terrifying calm suddenly washed over my brain. The hurt instantly evaporated, replaced by an ice-cold clarity. I did not cry. I refused to give them the satisfaction of a single tear. I stood up slowly. The wooden legs of my chair scraped loudly against the floorboards. I reached behind my waist, untied the stained apron, and let it drop onto the floor. I did not say a single word. I turned my back on the silent room, walked to the hallway, grabbed my frayed, broken winter coat, and walked out the front door. I stepped out into the freezing, biting Nebraska night, leaving the door wide open behind me. Let them feel the cold. The cold hit me instantly, biting at my exposed neck and freezing the moisture in my lungs, but I barely felt it. I got into my old sedan, my hands completely numb as I shoved the key into the ignition. The engine sputtered, whining against the freezing temperatures before finally turning over. I backed out of the driveway, the tires slipping on the fresh layer of ice, and drove away from the house I had paid for. The snowstorm had intensified. The roads were treacherous, covered in a slick sheet of black ice hiding beneath the drifting white powder. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned a bruised shade of purple. I drove aggressively through the dark, empty streets of Lincoln. My mind was racing, replaying the scene over and over. A parasite. He called me a parasite. The sheer audacity, the unbelievable projection of his own failures onto me, echoed in the quiet cabin of the car. I drove straight to the west side of town, pulling into the narrow driveway of a small, neatly kept house. It belonged to Carter, my boyfriend. Carter is 40 years old, a high school history teacher with a calm, steady presence that I desperately needed. We had been dating for about a year, and he had witnessed the immense stress my family put on me, often begging me to set boundaries. I had always defended them. I would not defend them anymore. I stumbled up the concrete steps and banged on the front door. A few seconds later, the porch light flicked on and Carter opened the door. He was wearing gray sweatpants and an old college t-shirt, holding a mug of tea. When he saw me standing there, shivering violently in my broken coat, pale as a ghost with snow dusting my hair, his eyes widened in alarm. He didn't ask questions. He didn't demand an explanation. He just reached out, pulled me inside the warm house, and shut the heavy door against the storm. The contrast between the freezing, hostile night and the quiet, safe warmth of his living room made my knees finally buckle. Carter caught me. He led me to his worn leather couch, wrapped me tightly in 2 thick wool blankets, and went to the kitchen to make another cup of hot tea. When he came back, he sat quietly beside me. "They kicked me out," I whispered, my voice hoarse, sounding like it belonged to a stranger. He called me a parasite. Carter's jaw tightened. He wrapped his arms around my blanket-covered shoulders and pulled me close. "You are safe here, Claire," he said softly. "You can stay as long as you need." The adrenaline that had carried me through the snowstorm suddenly crashed. The sheer exhaustion of the day, the months, the years of endless labor finally caught up with me. I closed my eyes, the warmth of the tea sinking into my chest, and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep on his couch, unaware of the digital nightmare waiting for me in the morning. I woke up the next morning to the smell of fresh coffee brewing in the kitchen. For a brief second, I felt completely disoriented. Then, the memory of Edward's screaming face crashed down on me like a physical weight. I sat up, pushing the heavy blankets aside. The house was quiet. Carter was sitting at his small dining table, grading papers with a red pen. He looked up and offered a gentle, reassuring smile. "Good morning," he said. "I made breakfast, but I figured you might need caffeine first." "Carter, can I please borrow your laptop?" I asked, my voice urgent. Panic was beginning to bubble in my chest. If I was no longer living in that house, I needed to know exactly how much money I had left to my name to secure an apartment and start over. He nodded, pushing his silver laptop across the wooden table. I sat down, my fingers trembling slightly as I typed in the web address for my bank. I navigated to the login screen and entered my credentials. The dashboard loaded. I had my personal checking account, my small business savings account, and the joint family ledger account. The joint account was the one I used to manage the family's finances. I deposited $2,000 into it every month, and all their utility bills, property taxes, and the mortgage were set to auto-draft directly from it. I clicked on the joint ledger, expecting to see a balance of a few $1,000s, enough to cover January's upcoming expenses. The screen refreshed. I blinked, rubbing my eyes, sure I was misreading the numbers. The balance was entirely wrong. It was nearly empty. There was barely $100 left in the account. My heart began to hammer against my ribs like a trapped bird. I scrolled down, clicking on the transaction history tab. My eyes scanned the lines of data, and the horrific truth began to reveal itself line by line. There was a withdrawal for $200, then another for $500, then a massive transfer for $1,000. I pulled the history back further. Over the course of the last 4 months, while I was working myself to the bone, sleeping 4 hours a night to meet client deadlines, someone had been bleeding the account dry. There were exactly 40 separate transfers. They were meticulously disguised. The memos attached to the transfers read things like furnace maintenance, dad's physical therapy copay, and emergency plumbing repair. But I looked at the routing destination. They were not going to repair companies or medical clinics. Every single one of the 40 transfers was routed to an external bank account registered to a newly formed limited liability company. The company name was Chelsea's Chic Boutique LLC. I sat back in the chair, the air completely knocked out of my lungs. Chelsea. My lazy, complaining sister who refused to get a job because it was bad for her mental health. She had secretly siphoned off a total of $10,000 of my hard-earned money. She had stolen it to fund a delusional, doomed luxury fashion boutique project that she had been bragging about on social media, a project I assumed she was funding with a small business loan. She had counted on the fact that I was too exhausted, too overwhelmed with managing 3 jobs and paying all the major household bills, to notice the steady, methodical drain on the joint account. Diane had to have known. You do not hide $10,000 of stolen money in a house that small. That was why Diane smiled when Edward kicked me out. They had already drained me dry. They thought I was empty, so they threw away the shell. A white-hot, blinding fury overtook me. My hands shook violently as I pulled my cell phone from my pocket and dialed the customer service number on the back of my bank card. I navigated the automated menus, repeatedly hitting the 0 key until the system finally transferred me to a human being. I was put on a 20-minute hold, listening to cheerful, royalty-free jazz music while my entire life felt like it was crumbling. Finally, a representative answered. I practically yelled into the receiver, explaining that $10,000 had been fraudulently transferred out of my account over the past 4 months. I demanded the transactions be reversed. I demanded they file a police report for theft. The representative clicked her keyboard a few times. Her voice was polite, clinical, and utterly devastating. "Ma'am, I am looking at the account details now," she said. "Because this is a joint checking account, and the secondary account holder, Chelsea Hayes, is listed as an authorized user, her transfers are technically legal. She has full authorization to move those funds. We cannot classify this as bank fraud. If you wish to recover the funds, you will have to pursue it through civil litigation in a small claims court. The police will consider this a civil family dispute." I ended the call. I set the phone down on the wooden table. There would be no police. There would be no immediate justice. Chelsea had legally stolen $10,000 from me, and the system would do absolutely nothing to help me get it back. Carter watched me from the kitchen counter, his expression tight with worry. He poured a cup of black coffee and set it quietly next to the laptop. "What happened?" he asked softly. "Chelsea stole $10,000, I said, my voice completely flat. "And the bank says it is legal." I looked out the window. The snow was still falling, burying the city of Lincoln under a heavy, suffocating blanket of white. Edward's voice echoed in my head, loud and clear. "You are a parasite. We want to live without you." A strange, dark smile slowly crept across my face. It was the smile of a woman who had absolutely nothing left to lose. They wanted to live without me? They wanted to call me a parasite while literally draining my blood? Fine. I would give them exactly what they asked for. I turned back to the laptop screen. I opened a new tab and navigated to the local electric company's website. I logged into the portal using the family's credentials. The dashboard showed an upcoming auto draft payment for the massive, 3-story house. I moved the cursor over the settings gear. I clicked on Payment Options. I clicked on Cancel Auto Draft. A warning popped up asking if I was sure. I clicked Confirm. Next, I opened the City Water and Sewage Department website. Login. Payment Settings. Cancel Auto Draft. Confirm. Next was the Natural Gas Company. Login. Payment Settings. Cancel Auto Draft. Confirm. Finally, I navigated to the portal for the regional bank that held the mortgage on their house. This was the big one. This was the payment that kept a roof over their heads. I opened the billing tab. I deleted my credit card information entirely from their system, wiping the digital slate clean. I hit save. Click. Delete. Exhale. The physical sensation was incredible. It felt as if a giant, suffocating chain that had been wrapped around my chest for 5 long years suddenly snapped. I could breathe. For the first time in half a decade, I took a full, deep breath. I closed the laptop, pushing it away. They had stolen my past, but with a few simple clicks, I had just completely severed them from my future. The countdown to their destruction had officially begun. If you're listening and feeling outraged by how Claire's family treated her, please like this video, subscribe to our channel to support us, and don't forget to leave a comment with the name of the city you live in. Every comment helps the video reach more viewers. Thank you so much. With Carter standing quietly behind my chair, offering a silent but heavy wall of support, I finished the digital purge. The massive bills were gone, but the petty ones still remained, acting like small leeches attached to my name. I logged into the mobile carrier portal. There were 4 lines on the account. Mine, Edward's, Diane's, and Chelsea's. I had been paying the unlimited data plan for all of them for 5 years. I clicked on Edward's line and hit suspend. I did the same for Diane. When I got to Chelsea's line, I felt a sharp twinge of satisfaction as I clicked the button, cutting off the very device she had likely used to transfer my stolen $10,000. Finally, I logged into the auto insurance portal and removed my payment method from Edward's heavy-duty truck policy. I closed the laptop. The quiet hum of Carter's refrigerator was the only sound in the room. For 3 entire days, my world was completely silent. The snowstorm raged outside, burying Lincoln under 2 feet of snow, but inside Carter's small house, I experienced a level of peace I had not felt since my 20s. I spent my days drinking hot tea, organizing my portfolio, and drafting cold emails to potential local clients. I did not check my family's social media. I did not drive past their house. I existed in a safe, warm bubble. Then, on the afternoon of the 4th day, the silence shattered. My phone vibrated violently against the wooden coffee table. I looked at the screen. The caller ID was a random, unknown local number. I stared at it for a long moment, my heart picking up a frantic rhythm. Carter looked up from his book, his eyes silently asking if I was okay. I took a deep breath, steadied my shaking hands, and answered the call. "Hello," I said, keeping my voice carefully neutral. "Claire, what the hell is going on?" The voice booming through the small speaker belonged to Edward. He was screaming so loudly the audio distorted. He must have been using a neighbor's phone since I had suspended his line. "Hello, Dad," I replied, my voice chillingly calm. It surprised even me. "Do not hello me," he roared, his voice thick with panic and rage. The power company just shut off the electricity. The house is freezing. I tried to call them, and they said the auto pay was canceled and the account is hundreds of dollars past due. Then the water stopped working. What did you do? You need to call them right now and give them your card number. We are freezing in the dark. I closed my eyes. I pictured him standing in that massive, expensive house, his breath visible in the freezing air, realizing that the safety net he had verbally abused and thrown away was actually the only thing keeping him alive. I did not do anything, Dad, I said slowly, emphasizing every single word. I just stopped doing everything. You are throwing a temper tantrum, he yelled, the sound of Diane crying theatrically in the background bleeding through the line. You fix this right now, Claire. You are overreacting. You are family, and you are acting like a spoiled child. Turn the lights back on. I gripped the phone tightly. The memory of the Christmas dinner table flashed behind my eyelids. You said I was a parasite, Dad, I said, my voice dropping to a low, icy whisper that cut right through his screaming. You looked me in the eyes in front of everyone and told me to get out. You told me you wanted to live without me. I am just giving you exactly what you wanted. Claire, he started, his tone suddenly shifting from anger to a desperate realization. I did not let him finish. I hit the red end call button. I tossed the phone onto the sofa cushion. My hands were shaking, but a massive, unexpected smile broke across my face. Carter walked over, pulled me into a tight hug, and kissed the top of my head. The first domino had officially fallen. The reality of living in a dark, freezing house in the middle of a Nebraska winter apparently breaks a person's pride very quickly. It only took 2 more days for the next escalation. I was sitting at Carter's kitchen island, sketching a logo concept for a potential client, when a heavy, aggressive pounding rattled the front door. Carter frowned, setting down his coffee mug. He walked to the window, pulled back the curtain, and let out a heavy sigh. It is your mother, he said softly. Do you want me to tell her to leave? I shook my head, my jaw tightening. No. I need to handle this. I walked to the front door, unlocked the deadbolt, and pulled it open, but I kept my body firmly planted in the doorway, blocking her from stepping inside. The freezing winter air rushed into the warm house. Diane stood on the snow-covered porch, wrapped in her expensive designer winter coat, a coat I had bought her for her 60th birthday. Her perfect hair was slightly disheveled, and she had clearly applied fresh mascara just to let it run down her cheeks in manufactured, dramatic streaks. Claire, my sweet girl, she sobbed, reaching out to grab my hands. I took a sharp step back, crossing my arms over my chest. Do not touch me, Mom. What do you want? Her fake tears flowed harder. She pulled a tissue from her pocket and dabbed at her eyes, shivering exaggeratedly. How can you be so cold? She cried, her voice echoing down the quiet suburban street. The house is an icebox. We had to sleep in our winter coats last night. Your father's heart cannot take this stress. Please, Claire, I am begging you. Turn the services back on. We are your family. I stared at her, feeling absolutely nothing. The emotional manipulation that used to twist my stomach into painful knots now just looked pathetic and entirely transparent. Where is the $10,000, Mom? I asked, my voice flat and dead. Diane froze. The theatrical crying stopped instantly. Her eyes darted left and right, suddenly avoiding my gaze. I do not know what you are talking about, she stammered, gripping her expensive leather purse tightly. Do not lie to me, I snapped, the anger finally bleeding into my tone. I saw the bank statements. I saw the 40 transfers to Chelsea's fake boutique account. $10,000, Mom. While I was working 3 jobs and sleeping 4 hours a night to keep that roof over your head, you let her steal from me. You knew. You absolutely knew. She swallowed hard, her posture shifting from the weeping mother to the defensive enabler. It was an investment, Claire, she argued, her voice rising in pitch. Chelsea just needed a little push to get her business off the ground. You have so much, and you are always so stingy with her. We are family. Family shares. Family shares, I repeated, letting out a harsh, bitter laugh. Family shares. But when Dad called me a parasite and threw me out into a blizzard, you sat there and smiled. You smiled while you drank the wine I bought for you. Claire, please, go ask Chelsea to pay the electric bill with her investment, I said, stepping back and grabbing the door handle. Do not ever come to this house again. I slammed the heavy wooden door shut right in her face, turning the deadbolt with a loud, satisfying click. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to her muffled cries of outrage from the porch. A minute later, I heard the sound of her car engine starting and the tires spinning on the icy street as she drove away. When abusers lose control over their primary victim, they immediately try to control how other people see the victim. It is a predictable, pathetic cycle. The very next morning, my phone started buzzing relentlessly on the kitchen counter. It was not just one text message, it was a rapid-fire barrage of notifications, vibrating so hard the phone slowly danced across the granite surface. I picked it up and unlocked the screen. The messages were from distant cousins, old high school acquaintances, and nosy neighbors who still lived on my parents' street. I cannot believe you would do that to your parents. They are freezing, Claire. Have some compassion. You seriously abandoned your sick dad over a petty argument? Grow up. My stomach twisted into a tight, uncomfortable knot. I opened the Facebook app, and right at the top of my news feed was the source of the fire. Chelsea had written a massive, multi-paragraph status update, tagging dozens of family members and local community groups. I read through the wall of text. It was a masterclass in gaslighting and playing the victim. She claimed that I had suffered a sudden, terrifying mental breakdown on Christmas Eve. She wrote that I had screamed at my elderly, fragile parents, demanded an absurd amount of money from them, and then violently stormed out. She completely omitted the fact that Edward had called me a parasite. She ended the post by weeping digitally about how I had maliciously canceled their utilities in the dead of winter, leaving my sick father to freeze, and how she was desperately trying to hold the family together. To make matters worse, cousin Dalton, a 35-year-old mechanic who thrived on small-town drama and had not spoken to me in 3 years, had shared the post. He added his own commentary, calling me an ungrateful, spoiled brat who cared more about money than family. The post had dozens of comments. The entire town of Lincoln was dragging my name through the mud. My chest tightened with a suffocating sense of injustice. I wanted to scream. I wanted to type out a furious, defensive comment, listing every single dollar I had spent keeping them alive over the last 5 years. I wanted to expose them to the world. Carter walked up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist and resting his chin on my shoulder. He looked at the screen, reading the hateful comments. Do not do it, he said softly, his voice a grounding anchor. If you argue with pigs in the mud, you both get dirty, but the pig likes it. They want a reaction. Do not give them one. I closed my eyes, taking a deep, shaky breath. He was right. Engaging with them would only validate their twisted narrative. It would pull me back into the toxic chaos I had just escaped. But I was not going to let Chelsea completely erase the truth either. I walked over to the laptop. I logged back into the joint bank account. I pulled up the transaction history, explicitly filtering the 40 transfers that went directly into Chelsea's LLC. The total glared back at me, $10,000. I took a high-resolution screenshot of the page, making sure the dates and the destination account names were crystal clear. I saved the image file to my desktop, naming it The Truth. I did not post it. I did not send it to the group chat. I just kept it quietly in my back pocket, an undeniable piece of ammunition for the exact moment I would inevitably need it. Then, I went into my phone settings, turned off all social media notifications, and blocked Cousin Dalton and every single person who had texted me an insult. The smear campaign could burn brightly without me adding any oxygen to the fire. Anger is a fascinating emotion. If you let it fester, it will rot you from the inside out. But if you channel it, it becomes the most powerful, high-octane fuel on the planet. I took all the rage, all the betrayal, and all the humiliation my family had dumped on me, and I poured every single drop of it into my laptop. I spent 70 hours a week researching, sketching, and cold emailing every small business, tech startup, and local agency within a 50-mile radius of Lincoln. I built a brand new digital portfolio from scratch, showcasing the sleek, modern design style I had been forced to suppress while churning out cheap, fast freelance gigs to pay my parents' bills. I was completely unchained. My creativity returned like a flood. 3 weeks after the Christmas disaster, my inbox chimed with a notification. It was a reply from a local tech startup that was developing a new health and wellness app. They loved my portfolio and wanted to meet in person to discuss a complete branding overhaul, logo design, user interface mockups, and marketing materials. I met the CEO at a busy, modern coffee shop downtown. I wore a sharp blazer over a simple black turtleneck, carrying only my laptop and an air of absolute, unbreakable confidence. When you have survived having your life systematically dismantled by the people who are supposed to love you most, pitching a design concept to a stranger feels incredibly easy. I walked them through my vision, explaining the psychology behind my color choices and the typography. I did not stutter. I did not doubt myself. An hour later, the CEO extended his hand across the table. We shook on it. He sent the digital contract to my email right there in the coffee shop. I signed it on my phone. The retainer fee was $5,000, with another $5,000 due upon completion. I walked out of the coffee shop, the cold winter air hitting my face, but this time, it did not feel biting. It felt crisp and alive. I sat in my freezing car, gripping the steering wheel, and let out a loud, joyous laugh that echoed in the empty cabin. I immediately drove to the local bank, a different bank from the one my family used. I walked up to the teller and officially registered my new business account. I handed over the paperwork for my newly minted LLC. The name on the paper read, Claire Hayes Design. The money from the deposit hit my account the next day. It was mine. Every single cent of it was mine. No one was going to automatically deduct a $2,000 mortgage payment from it. No one was going to siphon off hundreds of dollars for a fake boutique. I bought a brand new, heavy-duty winter coat that afternoon. It was a deep, beautiful navy blue, and it was the warmest thing I had ever worn. I was finally rebuilding the empire they had forced me to burn down. The universe has a remarkable sense of timing. While my new business was officially getting off the ground, the consequences of my family's actions were finally catching up to them with brutal efficiency. Living in a mid-sized city like Lincoln means you never really have to go looking for gossip. It inevitably finds its way to your front door. 2 months after I cut them off, the snow began to melt, and Chelsea's imaginary fashion empire completely collapsed. I heard the details through a former client who happened to own the bakery next door to Chelsea's rented commercial space. Chelsea had used the stolen $10,000 to sign a lease on a premium storefront and to buy a ridiculous amount of cheap, fast fashion inventory that she tried to relabel and sell at luxury prices. But she had zero business sense, terrible marketing, and a famously toxic attitude that drove away the few customers who actually walked through the door. Without my monthly influx of cash to quietly cover her personal bills and her car payments, Chelsea's personal finances had dried up instantly. She could not pay the commercial rent for the second month in a row. The landlord, a notoriously strict property management company, did not care about her Facebook tears or her fabricated victim status. On a cold Tuesday morning, they arrived with a locksmith. They legally locked Chelsea out of the building. Because she had breached the contract and owed penalty fees, the landlord ordered the maintenance crew to clear the unit. My former client texted me, completely unprompted, detailing how the crew had unceremoniously dumped dozens of cheap plastic mannequins, racks of unsold polyester dresses, and gaudy pink neon signs straight into the snowy alleyway behind the building. Chelsea's grand, stolen dream was literally sitting in a dumpster. That evening, my phone showed a blocked voicemail notification. I had blocked Chelsea's number, but the carrier system still allowed voicemails to filter into a hidden folder. Morbid curiosity got the better of me. I tapped play. Chelsea's voice blasted through the speaker, utterly hysterical. She was sobbing so hard she was practically hyperventilating. "Claire, you ruined my life," she screamed, the sound of traffic rushing in the background. "They took my store. They threw my inventory in the trash. I have nothing. This is all your fault." If you had just paid the stupid electric bill, Dad would not have yelled at me, and I could have focused on my brand. You are a monster. I tapped the screen, deleting the voicemail halfway through her unhinged rant. I did not feel a single ounce of pity. She had stolen $10,000 from her own sister to build a castle out of sand, and she was furious at the ocean for washing it away. The profound lack of accountability was exactly why I had walked away. I set my phone face down on the desk, opened a new design file for my tech client, and went back to building a castle out of stone. As Chelsea's life hit a brick wall, Edward and Diane were spiraling toward an even darker reality. They had managed to get the electricity and water turned back on by begging extended family members for a high-interest personal loan, but the mortgage was a completely different beast. The regional bank did not care about family drama. They only cared about the thousands of dollars in missed payments. Edward, desperate to generate cash and far too proud to take a minimum-wage retail job, decided he could leverage his limited handyman skills. He started advertising his services on local community boards as an unlicensed plumber and contractor, offering cut-rate prices to wealthy homeowners on the south side of Lincoln. It was a catastrophic mistake. Word reached me through cousin Dalton, who was still trying to message me from alternate accounts, that Edward had taken a job installing a new water heater and piping system in a finished, luxury basement. Edward, trying to rush the job and cut corners on materials, failed to properly seal the main pressure valve. In the middle of the night, the pipe burst. Hundreds of gallons of pressurized water flooded the client's basement, destroying expensive hardwood floors, custom drywall, and imported furniture. The homeowner was furious. They threatened to sue Edward into oblivion. To avoid a massive, bankrupting lawsuit, Edward had to empty whatever microscopic savings he and Diane had left, plus the remaining borrowed money, just to pay for the professional disaster mitigation team to dry out the client's basement. They were completely broke. They had alienated the extended family by begging for money and failing to pay it back. They had zero income, and I was no longer there to silently transfer $2,000 into their account on the first of the month. The hammer finally fell right before the spring thaw. Carter and I were driving back from a grocery run when we had to take a detour that led us down my parents' old street. I did not ask Carter to turn around. I stared straight ahead out the passenger window as we drove past the massive, three-story house that had consumed my entire 20s and most of my 30s. There, taped securely to the heavy oak front door, was a bright, neon-orange piece of paper. It was impossible to miss. It was a formal notice of foreclosure and eviction from the bank. The lawn was overgrown and covered in dead branches. The expensive curtains Diane used to obsess over were drawn tight. The illusion of the perfect, wealthy, superior family had been entirely shattered, broadcasted in neon orange for the entire neighborhood to see. I looked at the house, a place where I had experienced so much anxiety, so much manipulation, and so much pain. I expected to feel a twinge of sadness or perhaps a heavy sense of guilt for letting it happen. Instead, I felt absolutely nothing. It was just a building. It was not my home, and it was certainly not my problem anymore. By the time summer arrived, my life was entirely unrecognizable. Claire Hayes' design had grown so fast that I could no longer work out of Carter's living room. I signed a commercial lease on a beautiful, sunlit office space right in the heart of downtown Lincoln. It had exposed brick walls, massive windows overlooking the busy street, and enough room for a drafting table, a meeting area, and my state-of-the-art computer setup. I was standing in the middle of the empty office on move-in day, holding a cup of coffee and breathing in the smell of fresh paint, when my phone chimed. It was an unsolicited text message from an unknown number. I opened it. The message began with an apology. "Claire, it is cousin Dalton. I know you blocked me, and I used my work phone to send this. I am sorry for what I said on Facebook. I did not know the whole story. Listen, things are really bad. The bank kicked your parents and Chelsea out yesterday. They are living in that cheap, run-down motel out by the highway. Edward is sick again, and Diane is losing her mind. They're out of options and out of food. Can you please just send $500? Just to get them through the week." I stared at the screen. A cheap motel by the highway. The mighty Edward Hayes, who had pounded his fist on a mahogany dining table and called me a parasite, was now sitting on a stained mattress in a budget motel room, sending his flying monkeys to beg for scraps. I did not feel a sudden rush of vindictive joy. I just felt an overwhelming sense of finality. I opened my photo gallery and found the image file I had saved months ago, the high-resolution screenshot of the bank ledger, clearly showing the 40 transfers totaling $10,000 going straight into Chelsea's fraudulent LLC account. I attached the image to the text message. I typed one single sentence underneath it. Ask Chelsea for the money. I hit send. I watched the little notification pop up confirming the image had been delivered to Dalton's phone. Then I blocked his work number too. I put my phone in my pocket, picked up a box of design books, and began unpacking my new life. I had finally learned the hardest lesson of all: you cannot save people who are actively trying to drown you. A few weeks later, Carter told me to dress nicely because we were going out to celebrate the official grand opening of my studio. The harsh Nebraska winter was a distant memory, replaced by a warm, golden summer evening. He drove us to the Sunken Gardens, a stunning, meticulously landscaped park right in the middle of Lincoln. It was my favorite place in the city, filled with vibrant flowers, quiet reflecting pools, and winding stone paths. We walked hand in hand along the brick walkways, the air smelling of blooming roses and damp earth. Carter was unusually quiet, his thumb gently tracing circles on the back of my hand. We stopped near a small waterfall, the sound of the rushing water masking the distant noise of the city traffic. Carter turned to face me. The evening sun cast a warm, golden light across his face. He looked into my eyes, and his expression was filled with a depth of love and respect that completely disarmed me. When you showed up at my door in a blizzard, shivering and broken, I was terrified, he said, his voice soft but unwavering. But over the last 6 months, I have watched you build an empire from absolute ashes. You took the worst betrayal imaginable, and you used it to forge a completely new life. You are the strongest, most brilliant woman I have ever known, Claire. My breath caught in my throat. My eyes welled with tears, but this time, they were not tears of pain or frustration. Carter reached into the pocket of his jacket and slowly lowered himself to one knee right there on the stone path. He opened a small velvet box, revealing a simple, elegant silver ring with a single, perfectly cut diamond. I do not want to just be your sanctuary from the storm anymore, he said, looking up at me with a nervous, beautiful smile. I want to be your partner in the sunlight. Claire Hayes, will you marry me? I did not hesitate. The word left my mouth before I even realized I was crying. Yes, I whispered, pulling him up from the ground and throwing my arms around his neck. Yes, absolutely yes. He slipped the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. It felt infinitely lighter than the heavy chains of obligation I had worn for the last 5 years. Standing there in the beautiful gardens, wrapped in the arms of a man who loved me for exactly who I was, I finally understood what a real family was supposed to feel like. We did not wait long to tie the knot. 3 months later, we hosted an intimate, beautiful wedding reception at a small local vineyard just outside of Lincoln. It was a perfect autumn afternoon. The leaves on the vines were turning brilliant shades of gold and red. I paid for the entire wedding myself, using the profits from my thriving design studio. I wore a simple, elegant white dress that I bought brand new. There were 50 guests in attendance. My clients, who had become fierce supporters of my work, were there. Carter's entire family, who had welcomed me with open arms and zero toxic drama, were there. The friends who had stood by me when the town gossips tried to ruin my reputation were there. There were exactly 3 empty seats in the back row of my mind where Edward, Diane, and Chelsea should have been. But looking out at the crowd of people laughing, drinking wine, and celebrating our future, I felt absolutely zero regret for cutting them out. I heard through the grapevine that Edward and Diane eventually moved out of state to live in a cramped basement apartment owned by Diane's sister, and Chelsea had taken a minimum wage job at a fast food restaurant just to survive. They were completely erased from my reality. Sometimes, society conditions us to believe that blood is thicker than water, that we must endlessly forgive the people who share our DNA, no matter how deeply they abuse us. I am living proof that this is a lie. True family is not defined by biology. It is defined by respect, reciprocity, and unconditional love. I had to amputate the diseased limb to save my own life, and the tree that grew from that difficult cut is more beautiful and resilient than I ever could have imagined. Am I wrong for letting my family face the brutal consequences of their own actions and completely cutting them out of my new life? What would you have done in my shoes? Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider hitting that button to join our community and hear more stories. See you in the next one.